Our first speaker is the Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has really been in the news lately. They are covering this activity from just about every point of view. So I'm really delighted that Rafael Bras could join us today. Rafael, thank you.
Very good. Well, let me begin by stating that I thought the session yesterday was wonderful. It was incredibly informative. I think the presenters did a wonderful job, and in many ways makes my comments and my time with you a little bit easier because, in particular, I think Jeff and Andrew put together perfectly in a very even way the whole dilemma, all the issues. They brought them out. They showed the strengths, they showed the weaknesses, and they talk a little bit about the technology. So I think that my talk is going to build a lot on that. I've changed it already a few times based on what I heard yesterday. So it assumes, and it's going to be building up on what you heard. This is a topic that I can personally say I do not believe that this is a fad. I do not believe that this is a transient revolution. I am not sure where it's going completely. I'm not sure where it's going to end up, but I am sure that whatever that other side will be, will end up in something different than what we have now. The other thing I'm sure of is that all of us in various institutions, public, private, small, big, research, non-research, will be affected differently and have different takes, or will have different takes on this whole issue of massive online education. I would like, as I start, but maybe posing to you and arguing to you that we spend too much time at this point wringing our hands and worrying, almost in a defensive mode, when I do think that there is so much in the concepts in here that can be positive, that we can thread and put together a story depending on what different organizations and different institutions are, that are positive and make the most of what this offers. So let me begin first with a statement and then start reviewing where we were yesterday. Why is this happening now? Those of us that have been in education for a while realize that online education is not new. As I will tell you in a few minutes, Georgia Tech has been doing online education for the last 30 years. When I was at MIT, we went back and forth discussing online education. There have been attempts by Cornell, Columbia, others. Many of them went belly up. When the last big movement occurred on this, OpenCourseWare at MIT was, in fact, if you were there at the time, like I was, an attempt to undercut the whole concept of online education, where the argument was made that we don't think we can make any money on this, and MIT was right, but there's something we can contribute to the world for. So we'll provide free information, not content. OpenCourseWare was not intended to provide content. It was to provide information. And in essence, they were undercutting everybody else. And it worked overall. Now, what has changed? Number one, my opinion, is there's a technology improvement. Absolutely, no question about it, that is true. But more importantly, we have learned a lot of how people learn. So the pedagogy of how to do these things has improved over these many years. And something many people do not say, and is very important, the students we are seeing today are those students that grew up with Facebook. And that is going to continue changing that way. They are different. They are different to me. You know, I'm a dinosaur compared to them in many ways. And we have to be cognizant of that difference. So those three things, I think, align themselves to make this a different time, in my opinion. So we've heard the big players, Coursera, edX, Udacity. They're not the only players. There's probably a new player in this arena every day. Most of them for profit. Why? Because education is big business. Let's not fool ourselves. It is. There's a lot of money involved. You've heard about the levels of investment that these companies are putting on. Yes, Coursera and Udacity are for-profit institutions. edX is not. Does that create a major difference? Actually, I don't think it does at all. The other thing that I can say about them, their strategies have been very different. How do they approach the business models of those three groups are very different. They may be converging, but they started very differently. And that has resulted in very different products and different levels of impact. So let's talk a little bit about some of the issues that I think Andrew put up yesterday. And you also heard them from Jeff. The issues of monetizing. At the end of the game, those for-profits have to make some money, and those of us that are non-for-profit cannot bleed money. Accreditation, credit certification, degrees. How do we do that properly? Security and compliance, guaranteeing that the person getting a credit is the right person. Impact on various educational sectors, particularly K-12 also, and the changing roles of instructors and classrooms. Those last two have not been addressed very much so far in here, but I think they're important. Let me say, and I'm being a little flippant on this, that the first three, in my opinion, will have relatively easy solutions. And you will, and they're already pretty much crystallizing. There are ways where many of these groups and participants are making money already on this. Are they making net profits? No, but is money beginning to flow? Yes. And there are many other ideas that will come up. Are there ways to guarantee proper credit and security and certification? I think so. In fact, except for the massiveness of it, we've been doing this for some time. So the security and compliance is also solvable. There will be solutions to this. I'm not saying we are there, but there will be solutions. A little harder is to talk about the impact on the various educational sectors. That crystal ball is one that all of us have our own version of it, and we can speculate on what would that be. But you can think, and I believe this has been said earlier, as an administrator, professor in a public institution at the moment, one of my big concerns, for example, is that there are many, many students out there, let's say even in the state of Georgia or in all through across the nation where we get our students, that do not have access to advanced placement courses and improvement courses. Yet to apply to Georgia Tech, let me tell you, you're not going to get in unless you come in with a significant amount of advanced placement knowledge. Not necessarily credit, but knowledge. So there are a lot of kids out there that are at a disadvantage simply because of where they are and where they go to school. So the potential of this type of tool to provide that alternative, and after all, we give credit for advanced placement if they come up with a 5 in the exams, not across the board, but we do. So there's a lot of potential. Changing role of instructors and classrooms. I'll get back to that later, but it certainly, in my opinion, it will have an impact, and we cannot hide from that. Is it going to impact the big research institutions, the premier institutions, the lead institutions? I do not believe so, not dramatically. But is it going to impact some of the great majority of institutions. I don't recall exactly, but the number of higher education institutions in the United States is between 3,000 and 4,000. About, what is it, maybe 500 you could call top residential, not even top, good residential institutions. The others are not. As simple as that. They're places where students go to school and they go back home for the most part. That this will have more of an impact on that type of institution, I believe, than in the top or the residential good 500 that I'm talking about. There are increasing rising concerns. Anybody that is reading the newspapers will see this constantly coming up. Amherst College, for example, declined to join edX. Duke University, this had nothing to do with massive online education, but they went into bilateral agreements with several institutions, including Emory, where they would exchange courses. And this was announced to a fair level of fanfare. And now the faculty is saying, no way, we're not going to do that. And as I understand it, Duke has pulled out of the agreement. Now, if you look at those two reactions, they are reactions that for different reasons. Amherst, I think, is a faculty that believes that the residential style of education is better than anything edX or anybody else can offer to them, and they don't want to play in this realm. In the case of Duke, it's a statement of saying, which is a little more controversial, we're not going to take a course from Emory, period. That is a little bit more directed, and it shows a different attitude and a different approach to the problem. The San Jose State professors refusing a Harvard course in philosophy, you heard that yesterday. Fascinating in many ways. I don't think, by the way, that the idea was that the Harvard course was going to substitute them. It was an inverted classroom use, just like they had done with edX on electronics. But they refused it. They were very upset. And interestingly, the Harvard professor wrote what I thought was a very apologetic letter. It was a fascinating give and take in there. And then, just a few days ago, May 30th, Chronicle of Higher Education, questions about academic freedom. So you can see that all these things are popping up. And they're popping up because people are waking up to the fact of what I just said at the beginning of my comments. This has something in it. It has some meat to it. It cannot be ignored, and people will not ignore it. And I predict that that debate is going to increase. An article in the New Yorker, which I strongly recommend you read, really lays it out beautifully and analyzes the many questions that massive online open courses provide. Are they the future of higher education? What are the business opportunities? Is this going to create a class system among universities? I believe that there is that potential. But I will pose to you that we already have a class system. I'm sorry, we're in Caltech, right? This is an extraordinary elite institution. MIT will argue the same thing. Georgia Tech will argue the same thing. But we are probably in one of the most elite, most powerful institutions in the world. That class system already exists. The question is not whether there are elite institutions. The question is whether elite institutions reach out to provide opportunity to all. That's a different question. And I think many of these elite institutions do. And that is important. The rise of for-profit universities. There is an underlying question here that has not come up yet here, and I want to pose it to you, and maybe we can discuss it. The big if is in here is, are the providers, the Coursera's, slowly drift to attempt to become content providers? I will call it the Netflix analogy, right? Where they were providers of content produced by others, and now they're producing their own. Is that a danger? Is that a possibility? I actually think it is a possibility. Is it a danger? I don't know. But is it real? Yes. And I have had this discussion with Coursera a lot. Within the, that is something that makes all of us in educational institutions very, very nervous. It makes our faculty very nervous, but cannot be ignored. It is a possibility that we have to consider. And then the question of the impact of MOOCs on the academic job market, and that's something that was brought up yesterday. Do we need as many PhDs? If many PhDs, not the graduates from Caltech or Georgia Tech or MIT, but we produce a lot of other PhDs that do go to some of the other 3,500 institutions. Are we going to need that many? That's a question that is worth exploring. I don't know the answer either, but it's a question. Let me mention some broader other rising tensions which are very important. I have no doubt in my mind, and I have lived in both private and public, both in two very large, powerful institutions, private and public. These are what drives and the way I would react or act in an MIT is different than the way I would react and expect to act or be expected to act in Georgia Tech. Not because one is better than the other, it's not a question of anything like that. It's a question that we have different stakeholders to which we respond to. And the pressures are different. My mandate as a provost of a public university, still, not as much as we would like, but 18% funded by the taxpayers of Georgia, puts and paints my role and my university differently than an MIT or a Caltech. And the role and what I do or do not do in this arena has to be colored by that situation, by that reality. We have pressures of governors, boards of regents, taxpayers relative to cost. I think that's true also for the privates. There is an increasing concern about costs being too high in education. And maybe this is a solution. I am not sure it will be. Certainly, I am sure it's not for the research institutions. This is not going to save us any money because that's not our cost structure. Our money is not in delivering the classroom education. That's not where our cost is, in hiring the top researchers and the labs that we build for them. And that is not going to be impacted by this. But in other type of institutions, yes. So you can see how the role of the political system and the larger policy setting arena in Washington, it has an effect both at the national and state level, because those pressures will continue, and some of us in some institutions will feel it more. So what to do? And this is something I believe. The hardest thing to do in a university is to try something new. But if we do not define our own agenda, I fear it will be defined by others. At least that's the position I've been taking. I do not expect, Georgia Tech to be a follower. Our vision says we are to define the technological research university of the 21st century. That's our vision statement. We're not, it doesn't say we're to follow those that define. So from that perspective, I feel that I am compelled to make sure that Georgia Tech is among those leaders and that we have some control by doing of where things may go. What are the drivers of online education or the institutions? Because that's important, how you organize something like this at Georgia Tech. But we have something called the Center of the 21st Century University, which is a group which I would call is our brain trust. They're the ones that are pushing the envelope, coming up with ideas, they dream thoughts, they try experiments. We have a well-established Georgia Tech professional education program that has been doing online education for the last 30 years. They have the know-how, they know the mechanics, they know how to do it, they have employees, they have 200 employees. We have a Center of Teaching and Learning that is focused, and a Vice Provost for Learning Excellence that is focused on making sure that whatever we do is good for our residential students and that our professors provide the best education possible. And how do we help them provide the best education possible to our students, whether it's using tools like this one or any other tool. So they play a role. And certainly my office, because I think this is something that institutionally is large. It's large for us, at least. And it goes beyond borders of any single college. So that's the way we have organized it in there. Let me talk a little bit about Georgia Tech professional education and online education. We've been doing this for 30 years. We provide something like 90 online courses each semester. We enroll 28,000 students. We employ faculty, the regular faculty. They get paid to do this beyond the regular salaries, and we hire others to do it. We provide degrees, not large numbers, but we give degrees online, and we have been doing it. Something not said here, this is a $30 million operation that nets to faculty and to units about $9 million a year. Not a trivial amount. Now, interestingly, if we were to approach this with fear, that unit and its leadership that responds to me will be scared to death. Because this is the unit that will be most affected by whatever we do in the other arena, in the MOOCs. How did we engage? In July 2012, we announced joining Coursera, a year ago. We also have, by the way, a MOOC agreement with Udacity. We have not offered a single MOOC course. It's a fairly new with Udacity. All our MOOC courses at the moment are with Coursera. But it indicates that part of our strategy is we want to be as platform independent as possible. Because I don't know where these things are going to end up. We want to be agile. We are providers of content, and we'll use whatever platform is most convenient for the goal. We already have offered about 8 courses. We have 335,000 students in our Coursera enrollments. Put in perspective, there are 160,000 alums of Georgia Tech overall. We have 22,000 students on campus. It's a little different. Most of these things have been quite successful. We've had a few glitches, no question about it. But the great majority, 90% of this has been quite successful. We go from courses on health IT to courses in English composition, which are funded by the Gates Foundation, Physics 101, and Introduction to Psychology. All those Gates Foundation courses, the physics and the psychology are being offered. The English, I don't think, has kicked in yet, but it's coming. There are about 10 to 15 other courses in development in Coursera. Invariably, when I speak to the faculty involved in teaching this magnitude of courses, and that gives you the rate of growth of this, I get three things, and we meet for lunch every month. This is a lot of work. I do not get enough support. And number three, I love it. It's almost completely contradictory, but I tell you, that's what you get. And it's beginning to change the way that those same people are educating our residential students. Our initial strategy, and we were running, was to expand our presence, let the innovation juices flow, do it as quickly as we could. Provide increased global access to our educational offerings. One of the big moments in one of those lunches was when the health IT professor said to me, or publicly there, said, you know, I just got an email from somebody in the Russian Republic. It was an MD, and the man said the following thing: I did not know that health IT was an issue, but boy, it's interesting. I agree, it's wonderful, I have enjoyed it a lot. And number two, I had no idea that Georgia Tech existed. Yes, all right. So when you think of it, the impact that that has is significant overall. So increase that global access. Experiment with new methods, platforms and ideas to deliver education. I've been doing that constantly. And enhance the learning options to our own students, residential students. The campus involvement has been extensive. We're moving very fast, and that creates some stresses here and there, but honestly, this has been quite open. We've had a couple of town halls. We have solicited inputs. We have a group that does research on MOOCs, led by the Center of Learning Excellence. They just reported on their first results on just this month. And we basically have engaged our governance structures, et cetera, as I would further talk in a second. But it is fast. It is fast. Compared to the normal rate of moving things in academia, we are moving, and we have moved. In our phase two, as we go into the second year, we're going to be a little bit more strategic for the next 20 courses. We're going to be asking tougher questions of why do we want to do this particular course? How does it benefit our students, and which do match or impedance matching of platforms and courses in the best possible way. So we're going to be a little bit more selective of how we do that. We have essentially a pipeline of faculty wanting to do this. Our limit is not faculty wanting to do this, it's money to do it with, interestingly enough at the moment. And also, we want to control quality to make sure we do avoid as many glitches as possible. Will there be glitches? There will be more glitches, I'm sure of that. Let me end by talking a little bit about the latest thing, which is the master's degree. This was announced just a couple of weeks ago. So this is certainly fairly unique, not in that it's an online degree, but that is a massively provided online degree that costs money. So this is not free. But the cost is a fraction of the cost of what would cost to do the same degree residentially at Georgia Tech. A person that takes this degree that you could do residentially in 3 terms over a 6-term period will probably end up paying about $6,800. which is a fraction of what they would pay in the regular residential format. It's also first because we're probably the first top large research university that has gone out and tried to do this. And it has caused a lot of stir. And believe me, it has caused a lot of anxiety and long wake-up hours at night for many people, not just me, on how to do this right. And we still have a lot of work to do. Let me mention that this degree was already an approved online degree at Georgia Tech through our Georgia Tech Professional Education Program. It was already there. It has been offered before online. It's just not massively and for a different cost structure. So that's the difference. Otherwise, it's the same degree. So we really needed no approval, theoretically, from the regions, or for that matter, from our governance structure. But we did it anyway. We went through that process and went all the way to the regions and said, we're doing this. Although we had green light from the chancellor's office says, this is an approved degree. We don't need to do anything for that. Now, the only thing we had to request, which was a little bit ironic, I had to stand there and say, I want your permission to charge less. And they look at me and say, wow, that's a first. But you can, and that has repercussions that I fear a little bit. I don't know how is that going to completely translate. Why are we doing it? It's an opportunity to, I think, to extend high quality education to a large number of people out there from one of the top 10 computer sciences groups anywhere. Opportunity to lead and not to follow. We have, through our MOOCs experience, and it has been said here, that most of the students that we are getting, and I suspect we will get in this, are students that are older. To get this degree, by the way, you need a bachelor's of science already in computer science or an equivalent. Otherwise, you cannot get in. You have to apply, a regular procedure. I'll be happy to answer questions about that. But I think that, again, that audience is a little older and people that work, people that are in corporate settings, and so on. So I think this is, there's a large worldwide population that really can benefit from this. Our agreement is with Udacity. Our platform is Udacity, not Coursera. Why? Because that has been Udacity's strategy, and their focus has been in computer science. And at the end, when we spent many, many hours talking to Sebastian Tron, who was a big advocate of this, we felt that for this particular product, they were the best partners. I think Coursera could have done it also. I think edX could have done it also. This was driven not by me. I want to dispel that because there's been some public writings that says that this was driven from above, implying me and the president. Not at all. This came out strictly from the college. In fact, we had some concerns about it and pushed back on the issue. We have a 60-40 Georgia Tech Udacity split on any net profits or losses. We follow the regular procedure of admission, registration, and payment through our Georgia Tech Professional Education Program that is set up to do that, except for the size, and we're worried about that. Georgia Tech has the IP, Udacity controls the platform. The production of the courses in the Udacity platform is going to be first directed by Udacity during certainly the first year, and then slowly migrate with the Udacity platform to be produced at Georgia Tech Professional Education. The expectations is that we find high quality students in corporate and non-corporate world willing to pay the $7,000 or so for those that want to complete this course online. We already know from corporate friends, and I should also say that the one way I'm using, or we're using, hopefully, 0 state dollars for this. And we wanted purposely to do that. So in the ramping up process of the first 3 years, the first year, it is subsidized by a gift from AT&T. It doesn't buy them anything. Their students have to apply, they have to pay. So it's a gift. Allows us to make it through the first year, hopefully in the black, not making any money, but in the black, not losing money. And then the second and third year, we better stand on our own. That's the business plan. Biggest concerns? We have to provide a quality program. There's no compromise on that, and that's the one thing that we all worry about, making sure that that happens. And I am certainly very concerned if our financial model is wrong, because we can ill afford to lose money on this. So it has to essentially break even and hopefully make some money. And I can talk to you that later if you ask me. The bottom line, I think that there's a revolution going on. I think it involves risk, but we have to play. We have to be leaders, not followers, and we have to be true to our vision. Otherwise, I think we would become second class. And I want to remain strongly, not in the top 500, but in the top 10 of those top universities. So I think to do that, I cannot sit idle, and the institution cannot sit idle. With that, any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer. Thank you very much. I think we have time for some questions, right? Yeah.
Before we have a wireless microphone,
Thank you very much, Provost Brass, for sharing your experience with MOOC. I have a couple of questions, a very quick one. Regarding your financial model, you mentioned that for your full-time master's program, you are charging a fraction of the normal cost. Can you share with us how did you decide what fraction?
Yeah, we did. This is priced on a full cost accounting. In other words, there's no subsidy in this. We went through an exercise and loaded everything we could think of in terms of total cost, including overhead for admissions and processing and registration, all that. So this is loaded with overhead, everything. The estimated cost of producing one course that we have for this program is $300,000. Okay, that is a lot different than what you hear very commonly of a MOOC being produced by $50,000. And the reason a MOOC can be produced for $50,000 is because every time I produce a Coursera course, I'm using the facilities I already have and the establishment I already have and the infrastructure I already have, and I'm charging nothing for that, right? This is different. I'm charging everything for this. Now, to make it add up, our projections are to, over the first 3 years, which is sort of the pilot, to start adding students at a certain rate. And there are 4 types of students in the model. Students that are degree seeking, but not candidates yet. And I'll tell you why. Because if you want to get into the program, you have to apply. And you apply through a regular procedures with one difference. We do not require, because this is the worldwide thing in many ways, we're not going to require the GRE. And you may say it doesn't matter, or it matters. But in lieu of the GRE, you have to pass the first 2 classes and pay for them with an A or a B. to get in. So that's the first. Second class of students is those that already have gone through that and are candidates. Third class of students are those that do not care about the degree, but want credit for classes, for individual classes. The fourth type of student are the MOOC type. They just want to listen to it. They're not going to be assessed. They're going to get no service. They'll pay nothing. They just access it. So those are the, well, if they want to get a certificate like Coursera does, they'll pay a little bit of money for that. Those are the four classes. The first three pay per credit hour. The four pay for certificates if they want any, or pay nothing if they don't want any. We need to come up with about 200 degree seekers, or our plan, per term for the next 3 years. So every term you're going to be adding, presume that they're going to take 3 years to finish, and you're going to be adding 200 every term. That's our model projections. If we do that, by the second year, we'll be comfortable. By the third year, we'll actually be making a significant amount of money. Are we going to become, is it going to solve the problems of budget in Georgia Tech? No, but it's not insignificant.
Thank you. Can I have the second question? Just a very quick one. Your MOOC course, for example, Physics 101, that you're offering open, for your own students, are they allowed to take it, and do they get credit for it?
The answer is no, so far. Physics 101 was developed recently by a great professor of physics, by the way, and this is mechanics, Newtonian mechanics. And it was developed as a MOOC for free access by anybody. We got $50,000 from the Gates Foundation to develop it, and as I told you, $50,000 doesn't begin to pay for the real cost of this. But we were very excited about it. He is very excited. He finished this course. He's so excited that next year, he's going to invert the classroom and use the MOOC as the base on which to teach the Georgia Tech students. So it's going to happen, exactly that. They do not pay. In other words, the student, by agreement, our agreement with Coursera says that we can, by choice, take any course that is offered as a MOOC, or even if it is not offered as a MOOC. In other words, we can develop our own course, put it on the Coursera platform, and offer it just to our students. So this will be both. It will be available and it will be inverted. And you say, how do you teach Physics 101 that is lab intensive? And I have to say, I had my doubts, but this guy convinced me. I just saw him talking about it and doing it. For example, Physics 101 is all about motions, right? Newtonian mechanics. So you and I went and did physics by sliding little balls in ramps and seeing what happens and measuring time. So what he does, he makes, I left my phone there, but he assumes that you're going to have an intelligent telephone with filming. And then his homeworks and labs are go out and film motion. And then using that film, he provides software to analyze the motion. And then you do the exercise based on that. So it's actually pretty neat. And I think it's a lot more real than the little ball rolling down the ramp. And I think the student will be more excited about it. He's very good. He's very good.
I have the microphone. So the OMS degree we think is a very exciting and interesting experiment, and certainly at Stanford we're following it very closely. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One is related to the accreditation. At least in our part of the country, we have WASC looking specifically at every online degree program. And they are also asking us for, to submit it for prior approval. I wonder whether the rules are similar for the, I think it's the Southern Association of
SACS, yeah.
SACS in your part of the country. WASC particularly, the Western Association is asking us specifically to show the equivalency of learning outcomes now, and I wonder whether you have looked into this and
No, we have looked into it. No question about it. Now, again, first, this is a master's degree, all right? So a professional master's degree. Second, this was already approved by SACS. It existed as an online course. The challenge is how to do it and create all those assessments and all that with large numbers. That's going to be in the thousands. It's not going to be 100,000, but it's going to be on the 6,000 level. I actually think that in many ways, as you heard from Andrew yesterday, a lot of the data of assessment is going to be a lot simpler here than under the normal procedures. SACS knows about this, obviously, and they have been informed. Although, again, the degree was already part of our accreditation process. I think, like all of us, they're trying to figure out ways of how to do this right, and we're going to be fully cooperating with them to do so. In fact, Monday, I'm going to a whole-day workshop with SACS because we're entering our 10-year cycle. So I'll learn some more.
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll have the opportunity to compare notes going forward. I think this is uncharted territory.
It is uncharted territory
so
for us and for them.
Yeah. And of course also in our part of the country.
Yeah.
The other topic, completely unrelated to this, but also about the OMS, the faculty incentives that you have as part of the program. Can you share a little bit your considerations on these and how these are paid out? Are these paid directly as supplementary pay to the faculty, or do they essentially get discretionary funds from doing this?
It's a good question. So let me answer a little bit more on it. With the Coursera agreement, the way we did the Coursera agreement for the regular MOOCs is that we did it through something called the Georgia Tech Research Corporation, which is sort of a 501(c) corporation that actually receives the research money and handles our intellectual property. So Coursera is handled much like you as a professor were licensing a product or an idea. And there are established formulas to distribute income from that license. So any professor that participates in Coursera or Udacity MOOCs through Georgia Tech is perceived as licensing intellectual content, and they will receive income depending on what comes in.
Basically royalty income. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. By an established formula. We change nothing on that, and they have the mechanisms to do all this, and so that's why we picked that mechanism. It was the easiest path that was well accepted. The case of the MOOCs, or we used to call them masters, but we don't like that any longer. The computer science masters is slightly different. We're handling that through the existing Georgia Tech professional education program where the degree was approved. It was a computer science degree, so the faculty is the computer science faculty, but it was handled through the professional education program. They already have a process by which faculty that are doing courses through them above their normal teaching duties get compensated. So there are ways and mechanisms to compensate them. In this case, so what we prize in this, and I say this because this is public, so when you're in a state university, there's no secrets. A faculty that develops one of these master's courses beyond their teaching duties, it has to be beyond, get $30,000 upfront, that in most cases will go to a discretionary account for their use. As long as it's legal, they can use it for everything, all right? So $30,000. Every time that that individual or anybody actually is the instructor in charge, I said that wrong, they get $20,000, and then if they are the instructor in charge, they get an additional $10,000. But if I develop the course and got the $20,000, and you are the instructor in charge, you get the $10,000. You see the?
Yep.
Every time the course is used by anybody else, they get a royalty of $2,500 that goes into the same discretionary account. And that's part of the pricing costing model. And it's nothing different than what we do already for professional education. The magnitudes change, but it's the same model.